Good evening. Coast Guards and police are dealing with an ongoing major incident on board an oil tanker in the English Channel just south of the Isle of Wight. It's been reported that up to 7 stowaways who may have got on board in Nigeria were discovered by the Nave Andromeda's crew today as it made its way towards Southampton. It's thought that attempts to lock them in a cabin failed and they turned violent. The captain and crew are believed to be safe. Well, the tanker is currently manoeuvring at very slow speed. The Coast Guard has declared a 5-mile exclusion zone around the ship. Search and rescue helicopters have been monitoring the situation throughout the day. Well, this is where the Nave Andromeda is right now. The Greek-operated and Liberian-registered oil tanker had left Nigeria on October the 5th and was due in Southampton at 10:35 this morning. Well, Bob Seeley is the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, and he told Sky News a little earlier the incident would be treated as a marine counter-terrorism incident.
Nature of boarding a vessel at sea, I suspect it'll be handed over to the relevant military unit pretty quickly. And there's an MCT squadron or unit that will be dealing with this and looking at options. What we can find out about the vessel, what it's carrying, who's on it, who they know who's on it, who may also be on it, where they're from, what their potential motivations are, and the options for dealing with them.
Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to the reporter Harriet Hadfield, who's in the Isle of Wight. But first, let's go to our Home Affairs correspondent, Mark White, who joins us this evening. Mark, lots of questions still unanswered about this unfolding situation, but I suppose the most critical at this stage is the question of who is at the helm of this enormous 42,000 oil tanker off the coast of the Isle of Wight.
Yes, we don't know that. We don't know if it's the crew that are in control, perhaps locked away on the bridge, whether it's the crew under instructions, being coerced in some way by the stowaways on board, or whether it's actually much more worrying, of course, the stowaways themselves somehow at the controls of this vessel. What we do know is that at 10:45 this morning, the vessel, which had been heading for Southampton, it was late in docking as it was, but not far from Southampton, just off the Isle of Wight there, it began taking this erratic course, a zigzagging course for a couple of hours really, before it then took another course, and it's really been kind of circling around in that area in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. This 42,000-ton, 228-metre-long oil tanker circling around, seemingly without any proper destination, off its normal course, and a great danger to shipping that's out there in the Channel at the moment. So there's no understating just how serious this evolving situation is. At the moment, you have 2 Coast Guard helicopters that are circling the scene. 2 police helicopters also involved, and they're important because they're able to beam back real-time live images to the authorities as they try to determine what next they need to do. I'm also told from a source that a Chinook helicopter has taken off, that the military are now to some extent involved in this ongoing situation. Whether that means at some point the military will board this vessel, we don't know. That will all, of course, depend on the state of the crew, how safe or otherwise they are, and what has happened to the stowaways. We know that there were 7 stowaways on board this vessel. We were told this by a representative from Lloyd's List, who has been speaking to the owners of the vessel. They've confirmed 7 stowaways were discovered recently on board the vessel. They tried to detain those stowaways in a cabin on board the vessel. At that point, the stowaways became violent, and this developed into what is now, of course, a very serious and potentially very dangerous situation out at sea there in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, with this vessel, which is full of crude oil, heading to that port in Southampton.
OK, thank you very much, Mark. Let's bring in Harriet Hadfield for us now. And Harriet, you've been tracking the movement of this vessel for several hours now. Within sight of where you are, what can you see?
Yeah, we've just got darkness falling, but we have managed to find quite a high vantage point here on the southeast coast of the Isle of Wight to bring you these pictures of the Nave Andromeda. She's just turned her lights on because, as I said, just getting dark now, and she's almost slightly disappearing into the mist. She's a red oil tanker. She's 228 metres long, and we're told she's carrying 42,000 tonnes of crude oil on board. Now, as you can see, there are no other ships around her. That is because an exclusion zone of 5 nautical miles, it's just over 3 normal miles, has been put around the Nave Andromeda. I guess because authorities want to keep other vessels safe, keep them away from the situation. We saw a very small fishing boat slip past into the port here of Ventnor, so probably had been given clearance to slip past and go home. As Mark White was saying, lots of helicopter activity. I can see one going over my shoulder as I speak. We've had 2 Coast Guard helicopters. One had come from locally on Solent, another from much further up the coast in Kent, and they were really taking in turns throughout the afternoon, one going into refuel and the other coming and circling. We now have Metropolitan Police helicopter has been confirmed to be there as well. There's a police presence also where I'm standing, and a small crowd of people has been gathering here because obviously quite an unusual thing to be happening off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Normally this would be a very, very, very busy stretch of coastline. It's really where the English Channel turns into the Solent, and that heads up into the port of Southampton, which is where we're told she was headed. So quite a difficult situation here for authorities to be trying to deal with. She hasn't moved much. She's just spinning really around at the moment. So they will be looking, I think, through the night to try and bring this to a peaceful conclusion.
OK, Harriet, thank you. Let's speak to Mark a little bit more now. And just given the nature of what this vessel is carrying, Mark, it's extremely hazardous. And although we are, of course, a maritime nation, these kinds of incidents are incredibly rare, thankfully.
Yes, they are indeed. The Home Secretary is being kept up to speed with what is happening out in the English Channel at the moment. You say they are rare. They are. In fact, in January of this year, 4 Nigerian men were jailed for their part in threatening the crew on board a cargo vessel, a 78,000-tonne cargo vessel in the Thames estuary back in December of 2018. Now, they had been found on that vessel shortly after it left the port of Lagos. They were put in quarantine on board the vessel, but shortly before it was due to dock in the UK, they broke free from quarantine and started threatening the crew and indeed military personnel who came on board that vessel eventually to end that particular standoff. So it's not unknown, it is rare, and certainly the security services and the military in this country train for such incidents and train for boarding vessels at sea. As I say, we saw it enacted in December of 2018. It's possible the same may happen at this time. What we know is that the 7 stowaways on board this vessel, according again to Lloyd's List, who've been speaking to the owners, it's believed that those 7 stowaways boarded the vessel at the port in Lagos. They got in through the rudder trunk at the stern of the vessel and into that vessel. And then for 19 days almost, they had gone undiscovered. So they clearly had food and water supplies. They were either discovered by the crew in the past day or so, or perhaps they came out themselves. But whatever has happened, they turned violent, according to this representative of Lloyd's List. And then at that point, the crew declared an emergency. They've gone to safe areas, we're told, within the ship. We don't know if any member of the crew has been harmed at this stage, but that will all be factored in for the police, the security services, the security agencies such as the military, as they work out their next plan of action, whether they have to board the ship, whether it can be brought about to some more of a peaceful resolution. It's possible that the stowaways on board this vessel simply wanted to get into UK waters and then to hand themselves over to claim asylum, perhaps to put themselves in the asylum system. We know that's a pattern that plays out quite regularly, certainly with these small inflatable boats that come across the channel in ever greater numbers. But also we must add that these bigger vessels from time to time find stowaways on board as well, people trying to get passage from one country to another country illegally. And that may well be what we're seeing playing out here. But at the moment, as you see that vessel out there, perhaps some good news, looking at the live shots of that vessel. The fact the lights are on may indicate that that's people with knowledge, the crew that are on board that vessel in the bridge, working the lights, the safety lights, putting them on to ensure that other traffic, other maritime traffic out in the channel are aware of where this vessel is. If it was the stowaways in sole charge, you would imagine they probably don't know how to do something like that. It doesn't preclude, of course, the possibility that the crew are in some way being forced to do what they're doing by the stowaways. As I say, that is all obviously being worked out by the security services, the police and the military, as they try to determine what their next move will be to regain control of this vessel.
OK, Mark, stay with us. I'm just going to bring Harriet back in and just talk about the fact, as Mark was describing, the lights being turned on above the Nave Andromeda this evening, that being a particularly good thing given that light has now fallen. A busy shipping lane, Harriet, and, of course, the security services trying to deal with this situation. The fact that it's dark making it all the more difficult for them, no doubt.
Yes, and I think Mark's absolutely right. The fact that the lights have been turned on suggests there is some control of the situation here, because, of course, at night all ships would want to have their lights on to make sure that other vessels would be able to see them. Although in this instance, there is an exclusion zone around her, Isabel, which is keeping all other ships away. I can now see one of those helicopters still circling overhead. It passed by me about 4 or 5 minutes ago, and we know that there have been now around 4 helicopters down here taking it in turns to monitor the situation. But it is really getting dark now, and so it's a very difficult situation. They will be monitoring things extremely carefully, very difficult to do when a vessel is out at sea like this. Normally, as you said, a very, very busy shipping channel, and at night often many ships are moored off here. They're waiting to go into Southampton the next day, but they will all be being kept well away from this situation as they try and bring it to, hopefully, a peaceful conclusion overnight.
OK, Harriet, thanks very much. Let's just have a final thought then with Mark White. In fact, I'm being told he has now gone, so let's move on and